The boy was eating breakfast when he accidentally knocked over the plate. As a result, the food floated in the air. Just as the boy was trying to figure out the mystery, his mother burst in suddenly. The food fell directly to the ground. Although the mother was very angry, she patiently cleaned up the mess. The boy's name is Dion. On the way to school, Dion told his mother that he could perform magic and make things float in the air. His mother, Nico, thought he was just joking. However, the trash in the nearby garbage can actually begin to float. When he arrived at school, Dion wanted to show his classmates his superpower, but no one believed him. During mealtime, no one was willing to sit with him. Fortunately, a little girl was willing to play with him. She told Dion that if he wanted to be accepted by everyone, he had to learn how to skateboard. After school, he found a classmate to show off his skills, but Dion, who didn't know how to skateboard, fell to the ground immediately. He fell again and again in the following attempts. His classmates all laughed at him. Dion decided to give it one last try. This time, not only did he not fall, but he also performed a high difficulty move. The classmates were all surprised. The skateboard spun in the air for a few rounds and then landed accurately under his feet. When he got home, Dion showed his mother his superpower. Nico was startled. Then many toys began to float. As more and more toys floated, they spun faster and faster. Nico told Dion to stop, but no matter what Dion did, it didn't work. The toys even scratched Nico. The more Dion shouted, the faster the toys spun. Just as the lamp was about to hit Nico, it suddenly stopped, and then all the toys fell to the ground. Nico was very worried that something might be wrong with Dion, so she took him to the hospital. After the examination, no abnormalities were found in Dion. Nico told the doctor the whole story and showed her injured shoulder to the doctor, but the doctor said that she might be the one who was not normal. After returning home, Nico felt that the situation was not that simple. To prevent Dion's superpower from hurting anyone, she took her son to their lakeside home the next day. The two of them went fishing in a small boat. However, they didn't see any fish after fishing for a long time. Then Dion kept repeating some strange gestures. In a short while, all the fish floated in the air. Nico said that fish would die without water. It seemed that Dion misunderstood his mother's meaning. Nico told him to put the fish back into the water quickly, but at that moment, she noticed that the surrounding trees began to sway. At that moment, a strong wind blew, causing the lake's surface to become choppy with huge waves, and a big tree was uprooted. A branch hit the boy and knocked him into the water. The situation was critical. His mother hurriedly jumped into the water and spent over 3 hours searching before she found the boy. That evening, after his mother had put Dion to sleep, she picked up her husband's photo. She couldn't help but put on her husband's clothes and took a whiff of the familiar scent. In the pocket of the clothes, she found a note with a person's name and a phone number on it. This was the person her husband had saved just before he died. At that moment, she suddenly heard Dion's cry and went outside to find him standing alone in the rain. When Nico reached Dion, she was stunned by the scene before her, but Dion was not afraid. He walked over and started playing with the rainman. Then, the rainman transformed into Dion's father and came to Nico's side. He told Nico to take Dion away quickly. As Nico reached out to touch him, her husband disappeared. The next day, Nico called the number on the note, but no one answered. Just then, a police officer came to her door. It turned out that the woman living across from them had disappeared the day before, and the police were there to investigate. Nico realized that Dion needed to learn to control his powers, but Dion got distracted by a squirrel. The squirrel ran ahead, and Dion chased after it until they reached a big tree. The squirrel climbed up the tree, and Dion, in a panic. Nico saw Dion up in the tree and rushed over, trying to climb up to save him. At that moment, Dion had an asthma attack. Nico hurried back home to get his medicine, then brought a ladder from the storage room and finally managed to rescue Dion. Afterward, Nico received a call. It was her cousin, offering her a job. She had to leave for a while to make a living. On her way, she stopped by a pharmacy to buy some medicine for her son. Dion wanted some chocolate, but Nico refused. However, as they left, all the chocolate followed them. The shopkeeper thought they were stealing, so Nico quickly took Dion and ran away. But while Nico was at her job interview, something astonishing happened again. Mom was in the middle of a job interview when her son suddenly levitated from his chair. Frightened, she rushed over just in time to prevent an accident. In this way, Dion had successfully ruined his mom's interview. His cousin was very worried and called George, hoping he could help Nicole. George was not only a good friend of Nicole's husband, but also his work assistant. He had always taken good care of Nick and Dion. When they got home, Dion dressed up like Superman and began to use his superpowers. At that moment, George came to visit and brought a hearty lunch with him. While Nicole and George were talking, Dion was playing with a telescope when he suddenly spotted a little girl's doll on the ground. He shouted loudly, but the girl couldn't hear him through the glass. So Dion used his superpower to teleport from the house to the street. He picked up the doll and called out to the girl. Nicole looked over. Fortunately, Dion's speed was faster than that of a car, which allowed him to narrowly escape a disaster. However, this scene left George completely stunned. Afterward, Nicole recounted the whole story to George, who found it hard to believe. To prove it, Dion used toy planes to stage an aerial battle. But his poor control over his superpowers made the whole thing seem incredible to George. Nicole was deeply worried that the uncontrollable powers might bring danger to Dion. That night, after Dion fell asleep, George comforted Nicole and said, "To control Dion's superpowers, we need to find a token that can help him focus." Nicole then gave Dion the watch left by her husband, telling him it was a lucky watch from his father that could help him control his powers. And sure enough, it worked like a charm. But on the first day of school, a classmate approached Dion and, under the pretext of performing magic, managed to trick him out of his watch. Dion's superpowers immediately went out of control, and he accidentally slammed the classmate into a wall. The principal happened to be there and saw the whole thing, and Dion was punished with a 2-day suspension. Meanwhile, Nicole received a call from a stranger, who asked her to meet in a small grove of trees. Nicole was reluctant, but the caller claimed to know something about her husband. When she arrived at the grove, there was no one in sight. Suddenly, a woman appeared behind her. This woman, it turned out, was also a superpowered individual who could make any part of her body invisible. Her name was Lena, and she was the woman whom Nicole's husband had saved with his life. She had met Nicole's husband during an expedition. While watching the northern lights, an accident had occurred, and everyone present had gained superpowers. Nicole then told Lena about seeing the lightning, the man, and her husband's spirit in the rain. Upon hearing this, Lena became flusterandied, after a few words, turned and left, vanishing into the grove. Back home, Nicole was contemplating life when she suddenly received a video from Lena. The boy placed his hands on the glass. A red glow enveloped the fox's wound, and soon the wound miraculously began to heal. Then, the fox started to jump around and yelp with joy. The boy's name is Dion, and he possesses incredible superpowers. Nick was busy with an interview and left Dion in the care of George. George took Dion to the company where his father had worked before he passed away. Looking at his father's photo, Dion felt a deep sense of longing. Just as the two were about to leave, Dion saw a deer in one of the rooms and wanted to go inside to take a closer look. However, George refused, explaining that it was a secret laboratory, and even he didn't have the right to enter. Dion tried to force his way in but found it impossible. So, he used his superpowers to block the surveillance camera nearby, and then the boss's access card flew into his hand. In this way, the two successfully slipped inside. The room was filled with all kinds of animals. These animals had been brought from Iceland and were still alive on the large screen. People who had visited Iceland were being monitored in real time by the company. Just as George was about to investigate further, he accidentally triggered the security alarm. George told Dion that they had to leave immediately, otherwise, they would lose their jobs. However, there was only one exit from the laboratory. Dion directly used his superpowers to shut down the company's power supply. Taking advantage of the blackout, the two escaped from the laboratory. Dion also took a hermit crab along the way. They blended into the crowd and successfully left the company. When they got home, George told Nick everything he had seen in the laboratory and showed her the list of people, which included Lena, who had been saved by Nick's husband. But why would Lena send him a video of the lightning man? As Nick was deep in thought, Dion interrupted her to show her the stolen hermit crab. Nick told him to return it, but George said it would be harder to get it back inside than to take it out. In the end, Nick had no choice but to let him keep it. The hermit crab was so happy that it began to glow. The company's boss discovered that the hermit crab was missing and suspected that a superpowered individual was involved. He ordered his subordinates to find out who had stolen the hermit crab. After Nick put Dion to bed, she thought of her husband again and watched a video of him from before he passed away. At that moment, Dion's father's spirit came to watch his sleeping son. A thunderclap sounded in the sky, and the father slowly vanished. Dion was awakened by the thunder and then took out his telescope to look outside. The sky was filled with lightning and thunder, and a lightning man appeared. Seeing that Dion was still awake, Nick asked him what he was doing. Dion replied that he was watching the lightning. Curious, Nick looked out the window as well. The next day, Dion built a model with building blocks and told his mother that it was something he had seen outside the window the day before. His mother didn't understand what he meant, so Dion used his superpowers to transform it into the appearance of the lightning man. His mother immediately took out her phone and asked Dion if it was what he had seen outside the window. Nico quickly called Lena, saying that there was something important he needed to talk to her about, but after waiting for a long time, Lena still hadn't shown up. Just as Nico was staring blankly at the lightning man model, Lena suddenly appeared. She said that the lightning man was very powerful and that she couldn't defeat him with her own strength. Moreover, the lightning man was also hunting her. After Nico's repeated requests, Lena finally agreed to help Dion. Subsequently, Nico found Dion, told him what had happened next, and instructed him not to tell anyone else. Lena's sudden appearance startled Dion, but he wasn't scared. Instead, he was very envious of her invisibility skill. Then, they went to a basement. Dion first demonstrated his superpowers. Lena pointed out Dion's shortcomings, and under her guidance, Dion quickly learned to make one of his hands disappear. Gradually, he also mastered the skills of invisibility and hiding. Lena kept pointing out his weaknesses.
Ow! Ow! Ow!
Until Dion successfully fooled Lena.
Haha, I fooled you!
While the two of them were resting and eating snacks, a man suddenly burst in, shouting loudly. Lena hugged Dion and became invisible. The man searched around but couldn't find anyone, so he left in a huff. However, they didn't know that everything had been captured by a drone. That evening, after Nico had put Dion to sleep, she saw Dion's watch on the floor. She picked it up and found a memory card inside. She then called Lena, and they inserted the card into a computer. Upon opening it, they discovered a file about Iceland, which contained a list of witnesses to the Aurora Borealis event. These people were all individuals with superpowers. In order to protect them from harm, Lena decided to go and find them herself. But she didn't know that some superpowered individuals had already been attacked by the Lightning Man. The boy had a fever of 63 degrees. The doctor brought an ice pack to give him a physical cooling. In the moment he turned around, the ice pack had turned into boiling water. It turned out that while George was taking Dion to school, George suddenly felt a headache. Dion used his superpower to treat him, but he found that his own body had also become abnormal. During the class, he suddenly felt dizzy. The teacher immediately took him to the hospital. When his temperature was measured, it was found to be over 60 degrees. The doctor gave Dion a fever reducer, but suddenly Dion felt dizzy and fell into a deep sleep. Seeing this, the doctor brought a basin of ice packs to cool him down. Nicole came to the hospital to see Dion. She was worried that if Dion's superpower was discovered, he would be in danger. But her sister thought she was a bit abnormal. It was not until she turned around and saw Dion floating in the air that her sister finally believed what Nicole had said. Dion really had superpowers. In order to keep Dion out of danger, his sister decided to delete Dion's medical records. But they didn't know that Dion's condition had already been seen by others. George, in order to help Dion, sneaked into the laboratory. From the data, he learned that those with superpowers had all experienced problems, and the reason was that their bodies needed to be supplemented with iodine to relieve the symptoms. Afterwards, he went to the hospital and told Nicole about his discovery. Soon, Dion's body began to react, and the surrounding equipment was also affected. Then his body started convulsing non-stop, and everyone around was thrown away. But Dion miraculously recovered. Nicole was about to take Dion home when a group of people in protective suits came to the hospital entrance. They stopped Nicole, put a mask on Dion, and forcibly took him away. Subsequently, Nick arrived at the biotech company, suspecting that they had taken Dion and even smashed the company's glass windows. The female CEO rushed over to explain and led Nick into a room. It turned out that they had already discovered that Dion not only had the ability to become invisible but could also heal a fox's wounds. They suspected that he was connected to the Iceland Aurora incident, and the Flashman was likely searching for Dion. Therefore, they wanted to conduct a 72-hour quarantine observation on Dion. In the end, Nick had no choice but to exchange the data left by his husband. After returning home, Lena found Nick and told him about the Flashman's murders of superpowered individuals. Nick asked Lena to stay and protect Dion. From then on, Lena used her invisibility to protect Dion on his way to school, and they happened to encounter a racist principal. Lena decided to teach him a lesson. As Dion walked past, on this day, George came to pick Dion up for school and noticed an extra breakfast on the table, which aroused his suspicion. On the way to school, George kept asking Dion who had been to their house, but Dion had promised his mother not to tell anyone about Lena. Seeing that Dion wouldn't speak, George stopped asking. At school, Dion told his classmates that he had superpowers, but no one believed him. So, Dion called a girl into the classroom and made her float up from her wheelchair until she admitted that she believed in his superpowers. Only then did Dion let her down. George came to talk to Nick and saw her dancing passionately with a man. George's heart was instantly filled with mixed feelings. After Nick got off work, George mustered up the courage to confess to her but was rejected. He had risked being fired for Nick, and he never expected this outcome. It made George feel like he had been used. Nick also told him never to come see Dion again and called Lena to make sure Dion didn't meet George. When George tried to see Dion, he was blocked by Lena. No! Lena's intervention revealed George's true nature.
I should have killed you in New Orleans.
After a brief struggle, she vanished. This terrifying scene was witnessed by Nicole. After completing his actions, the Lightning Man transformed back into George to search for Dion, but the house was already empty. Nick had already taken Dion and left by car. They arrived at a lakeside cabin. To protect Dion, Nicole reinforced the cabin with wooden boards. George, looking at his injured body, tried to call Nick, but there was no answer. so he contacted Dion through a game. Dion, who received the message, told George his location and then started acting out, using his superpowers to throw a tantrum. He would appear in the car one moment and on the floor the next. His mother had to go to the room to comfort Dion. At that moment, the sky darkened and a strong wind began to blow. Nick thought the lightning man had arrived, but in the blink of an eye, the sky was clear again. Nick opened the door in surprise, and George suddenly appeared in front of him. Before she could react, George walked into the room. Nicole grabbed him and discovered the wounds on his body. Just as George pushed open the door, Dion suddenly teleported back to school. At this point, Nicole realized that George was looking for Dion to heal his wounds. George also confessed that he was the lightning man. Knowing the truth, Nicole attacked George from behind. Not only did this fail to hurt George, but it also enraged him. Dion was at school preparing for a performance. George found Dion and asked him to heal his wounds. Unaware of the danger, Dion agreed. Nicole, who had woken up, crawled out of the rubble and called her boss at the company, telling him that George was the lightning man and asking for help to protect Dion. Later, Nicole arrived at the school and learned from a classmate that Dion had been taken to the basement by George. When she burst in, she saw Dion healing George. Nicole quickly tried to stop him and told Dion that George was the lightning man and had killed his father. Just as they were about to leave, George grabbed Nicole's foot and used her to force Dion to continue the healing. To protect his mother, Dion had no choice but to agree. During the healing process, Dion used his superpowers to throw a fireball, and the two of them managed to escape. But this completely enraged George, and the sky was filled with lightning and thunder as he transformed back into the lightning man. At that moment, the company's vehicle arrived. As they were discussing a plan, they were punched away by the lightning man. Nicole was also thrown hundreds of meters away. Seeing his mother hurt, Dion immediately rushed over and used his superpowers to fight the lightning. However, Dion was still too young and inexperienced, and he was quickly knocked to the ground. Just as the lightning man was about to kill Dion, Nicole rushed over with a large iron needle, stabbed it into the lightning man's body, and then had Dion use his superpowers. In a short while, the lightning man turned into a cloud of smoke. Several souls flew out of the smoke, including Dion's father, Mark. The family embraced, but soon Mark also disappeared.